From the Lean Enterprise Institute in Boston, this is the WLEI podcast, where we share stories of people making the world better through lean thinking and practice. For more information about LEI, including how we can help you apply lean thinking, please visit lean.org.
Welcome to the Management Brief. As a quick reminder for our listeners, this month we are exploring problem solving and its relationship to management systems. Today I'm joined by Josh Howell, my colleague, and our guest, Sal Sanchez. Sal was a former colleague of mine in Toyota. We worked together at TSSC, Toyota Supplier Support Center, in the late 90s, supporting the learning and practical application of the Toyota production system in Toyota suppliers and other organizations outside Toyota. Sal's Toyota career started in Toyota at NUMMI, Toyota's first automobile production facility in the U.S. He has also led lean transformations at large corporations. We'll explore Sal's experience and role, starting with his time as a team leader and group leader at NUMMI, but also establishing and supporting organizations to apply TPS and how problem solving connected to the daily management system, playing a key factor in the success of its application.
So thanks for joining me on the podcast, Sal.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
Let's start by having you share why you do what you do. What is your personal purpose and problem to solve?
Again, thanks for having me, Mark and Josh. I appreciate the opportunity. My personal purpose, really, it stems from my time working at NUMMI early on, working with TMC coordinators. One of the things they taught me was they shared with me lots of trainings and ideas, and they taught me that I had a responsibility to share these with others. So for me, my personal purpose is to be able to share what I've learned with others, and this is what I do, and I love doing it. My problem is this to solve is how do I do this more and more faster, really, and that's where I'm at.
Great, thank you. Let's have the audience get to know you. Why don't you introduce yourself, give us an overview of your work, your career, and your experience with TPS or Lean.
Sure. I really started in the grocery business very young, and spent 10 years there. And during those years, I learned quite a bit without understanding that it was lean. And I guess, this stems from, inventory turns and so on and so forth. And, the layout of the whole business, I say plant, but really it's the shop floor, which is the grocery store, right? But during this time, my father had worked at GM, and the plant that he worked at had closed down. And during that transition, Toyota and GM formed a joint venture at NUMMI, and he joined. He actually was hired on as a team leader, and he was sent to Japan and trained and came back and was really excited. During this time, I had no idea that I'd stop working at the grocery store and move into an auto plant, right? But he was excited. He talked about solving problems and doing changes, or kaizens, he called it, in his own process. And as I was a manager of a grocery store, I was unable to do those kind of things. It was always like that's somebody else's job. So I was excited. I quit and just started as a team member. And it was kind of strange because they said, well, we don't have a position for a manager. And I said, I want to start as a team member. I want to learn from that point on. And they said, okay. They hired me as a team member, and I worked the line as a team member for about a year. And after that, I became a team leader. And it always seemed that there was a reason why I needed to get to the next level. And I really wanted to help my fellow team members out with problems. And I actually took a quality circle training as a team member. And then they said, well, you have to be a team leader to be a facilitator. So I became a team leader. And that's where I started, really learning about problem solving. During that time, I had lots of opportunities to do problem solving circles. And at the same time, I was able to train other people at problem solving circles. We went through a growth spurt, and we hired about 1,000 people. And during that time, I had an opportunity to train those people in just fundamentals. And one of the basic fundamentals was problem solving. So I spent a lot of time doing that. It was great. I was excited. And, it's just to share what I know and solve problems daily that were affecting the shop floor was great for me. Then after that, I became a group leader. Again, something in me had me thinking was like, in order to do this, could I do that? And I became a group leader. And during my time as a group leader, again, I supported the shop floor with problem solving. In fact, one of my circles was selected to represent NUMMI at the North American Problem Solving it's not really a competition. Every plant selects a problem solving circle, and they were presented in one location in North America. And then this year we ended up presenting in Canada. So I did that, and that was a great experience. My team was excited from a simple problem, and we created an A3 and turned it into a presentation, and we were able to represent our plant. So we were excited about that. And then after that, I spent 3 years at TSSC, moving from California to Kentucky. That was a personal and career development for me and my family. So that was great. And during that time, it was amazing. I'd do it over again. And I was working with suppliers as well as plants. And then after that, I came back, worked in our TPS group, did 2 years there, training and developing. And really, in the past, it was really considered just a training center. And I wanted to change that from what I'd learned at TSSC and did more learning by doing. And so we did activities in each department on the shop floor. So we were able to learn and train a lot of people that way as well.
Can I maybe I want to follow up with a little question around some of
Sure.
your what you just explained. Many of our audience really never, I don't think, probably has gone through the career path you just mentioned, starting as a team member, as a production team member on the line. I'm sure there are those of you out there that have, but I think someone who's ended up in your place who's now helping a lot of organizations, that's a pretty foundational and interesting career start. I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about, in your role as, particularly, let's talk about your role as a team leader. Maybe you can describe for our audience like how you function like day to day. What was your work and your roles and responsibilities, particularly related to problem solving too, like day to day.
Right. Yeah, so day to day, my life as a team leader was to, I basically had 5 people that was on my team and that I supported. And basically, ensured that we were going to win for the day. I ensured that they were ready to go to start the shift, communicated issues from pass downs from the previous shifts to them, so they were ready to go for the day. So as soon as that bell rang, we reviewed the issues that for the day, any pass downs history, and if any problems came up, I was there to support them. And of course, we used what we call the andon system. So I was there if they needed any support. They had found an issue. They weren't able to complete their standardized work. They knew that all they had to do was pull a cord and that I would be there. And then, really, one of my goals that I really made a challenge for myself was how do I anticipate those, right? How do I call it scanning, which means is that I'm constantly up and down that line where the work happens and looking for potential problems to happen. I'm there when they call me, but I'm really trying to anticipate. If I hear, for example, a torque tool that makes a funny noise, I'm there before that happens, so they don't even have to call me. And so that was always my goal, is to check incoming work coming into the line into our areas. And then if there was an issue, then I would walk the line back and work with other departments. And as far as problem solving, that happened every day with issues that they came up through either the andon or ones that we saw, in our defects and that came up throughout the day as well. As far as problem solving, I was also, again, like I mentioned, I was a facilitator. So we would use the data, the Pareto charts that would tell us, what to focus on, and we would get together as a team and work on those problems or issues.
Great. So obviously, like you just described, as a team leader, you were there responding to andon polls and, interestingly enough, anticipating andon polls.
Yeah, yeah.
So with obviously great foresight promoted you to be a group leader. How did that change your kind of perspective, and what was the challenge stepping into that role?
Yeah, for me, it was challenging that actually they moved me from where I was on the final line. We called the final line the money line because every second that the line stopped, it was, real, it affected all the lines. And so then I was moved over to the trim line, new processes, and I had to quickly learn the jobs on those in that area, which was trim one. And and part of that learning was I needed to know for myself and understand those jobs, even though I was not a team member or team leader. It was a new area for me, so I needed to understand the problems that my members were going through. And the only way that I felt I could understand them was to, get on the job and do it and experience what they were doing and, all night long. And still, at the same time, was helping them solve problems. And what I learned was I was really focused as a team leader on what I would call process problems or issues, and then later as a group leader, I was more in the systems, meaning that I was dealing with the back shops, the body shop and paint shop, things that were coming in our area, as well as material issues that would come. There was a problem. I remember that we were getting some harnesses scheduled wrong from the conveyance area, the kitting area, and I proposed that, hey, you guys, we communicated to them, and then I at one point I said, hey, let's take over that area, because our team members would say, hey, why are we getting wrong sequence harnesses or damage? And I said, we'll take that area over. It's close to the line, moved it close to the line, and that we would just walk over those harnesses, and they felt ownership of that process. So it was those kind of things. It's like before it was just focus on the process that you're working on. Next step was going outside of that a little.
Okay.
Sal, can you talk a little bit? Uh, it's cool to hear that story about your transition into the group leader role. It was a new area for you, as you said, trim one versus final. And you just described how you learned the jobs that the team members had, the team leaders were responsible for supporting, so that you could experience the problems they were experiencing and become capable to support them. Was that like just initiative that you took on your own, or was that an expectation of your new boss in that area, or just a general sort of NUMMI or Toyota expectation?
I think it was like a new me Toyota expectation. Um, I know that when we brought in new group leaders, that would be the first thing my advice to them. And I think through the training is like get to know your area. That also earns the respect of the team members, that they understand, you understand their jobs. You're not going to be an expert by all means. I would get on a job, and I keep up with tack time? No, not all the time.
Sure.
But team members would laugh and they'd give me a hard time. But then they would help me out. They'd show me the little knack that they did, and so they. And then after that, they were just like, okay, what do you need? I can help you. So it
Yeah.
was great. And to tell you the truth, the reason I became a team leader to group leader was because I was teaching job instruction, the steps on how to train a person's job. And some people were getting it and some people were not doing that. And I said, hey, how can I tell them, if you're going to become a team member out on the shop floor, you're going to get job instruction. And group leaders weren't, kind of saying, hey, we need to do this. So I said, can they really do that? So that was one of the reasons that forced me to take
Yeah.
that step.
Oh, cool. So I think many of the people that are going to be listening to this conversation, Sal, Mark, are familiar with the NUMMI story. It's a pretty well-known story at this point. Probably lots of people have listened to the episode of This American Life that tells that story. It's also pretty well known, just as part of that story, that TPS really helped to save that company. I mean, you shared with us earlier your father's experience working in the GM plant that was shuttered, and then the opportunity he had to return to that plant in the NUMMI partnership. But of course, most of the people in the audience, virtually all of them, weren't there to experience it. So could you just talk a little bit about what that experience was like, especially in those early days, when the culture was changing, there was this incredible transformation underway? What was it like to just be a part of that?
I started probably about 7 years after it happened. And still there was all this discussion because at first NUMMI and GM's partnership was really a kind of a study. I think they gave it a 10-year chance. Let's see how this works.
Mm.
And it was funny thing is they all talked about it, but then 10 years came and gone, and we just continued producing great vehicles. And nobody talked about, oh, okay, that contract's over or whatever. It was, it got better and better, and that really showed by the quality awards that we were receiving, and people really enjoying to work there. So that to me, that was one of the things that I always asked, because we had a lot of what we called old timers, but they weren't necessarily old, but the people that came from GM. And we said, what was the difference? And they would tell us stories. But what they really, really appreciated was the kind of the sense of camaraderie, as well as the involvement, people being asked to participate and make decisions on their jobs. Because when you worked there, you didn't feel like you were just there to build cars. You were there to, for your ideas and thinking and how to improve. And so they basically empowered you to make decisions. So that was exciting.
If listeners have not checked out that This American Life podcast about NUMMI, I mean, I could not recommend it more strongly. And certainly that theme about like teamwork, camaraderie, as you called out, comes through so clearly in that story. It's just outstanding. So a couple of weeks ago, Mark and I had the chance to interview Art Smalley, who pretty well known, I think, across the community. Wrote a book that LEI published called Four Types of Problems. And he was explaining, we were talking about type 1 problem solving, sort of one by one, practical problem solving on the line, and how that's helpful in building stability in the organization. He refers to this type of problem solving as troubleshooting. You talked about that kind of problem solving already when you were sharing with us about kind of the day in the life of the team leader. You mentioned andon, which was also something that Art talked about. Could you just kind of explain, maybe for those that may be unfamiliar, exactly how that andon system works, like how it functions and how it relates to that kind of problem solving that was a part of your team leader role?
Yeah. So before near me, I never heard of the word andon. I didn't know what it meant. But quickly you learn that it really gave the team member the power, the ability to call for help, and nobody was going to get mad at you. Nobody came over and yelled at you. Nobody, said there wasn't a peer pressure that you'd pull this cord. It was more of like, okay, thank you for doing that. What is the issue? How can I help you? And to me, that was surprising that a company would do that. But at the same time, it created a sense of urgency to solve problems, because I think some people thought, oh, so you just pull the cord and the line stops. No, that's not how it works. You pull the line, and depending on where you are in your station, from fixed position to fixed position, you have some ability to respond to that. Again, team members would know, because there was visual marks on the floor, that if I pull it here, I have 30 seconds for somebody to respond. If I put it here, it might be a second. And so if they didn't have to stop right away, they would let it go to the next station, and we'd pull the cord and communicate. And it could have been like, hey, I saw some dirt in this area and it needs to be cleaned up. Or I need to stop and I need to fix it. And that also happened. But again, that sense of urgency of responding to the issues when the line was pulled, and then quickly doing problem solving. And that really helped, sparked us to work as a team, work with other teams around us, and get that line up and running again. And yeah, it was. At the same time, as I mentioned, it's really being more proactive than reactive, because just because somebody pulled a cord doesn't mean you have a minute to answer it. It means that you need to respond quickly, and then you make a decision. I basically, well, as a team leader, I've taken over the responsibility of that problem that the team member had.
Yeah.
I want to just jump in there for a moment, Josh. I love that explanation. When we were talking with Art a couple of weeks ago, what you just said, I think really supplemented a lot what he was talking about in terms of, because you hear people who are familiar with the system here, oh, well, having the culture to allow the team member to pull the end on, to feel comfortable, to there's going to be a problem, someone's going to help them. But this aspect you're speaking to of creating a sense of urgency to solve problems is a really important aspect of the system too. When we were talking recently with another gentleman who worked with us at TSSC, Olivier Leroux, he said something interesting. He said companies tend to not focus, they don't focus on problems until they get big. I think what's amazing about Toyota and the aspect you're speaking to is we're trying to stamp out these little problems, this troubleshooting like thinking, like
Mhm.
minute to minute, day to day in the organization, so they don't become big problems.
Yeah, I think some people are surprised that they'll ask, well, how many times did you pull the cord? Was it, hardly ever? And I said, no, that cord was going on all the time.
Yeah,
And if I walk into a place and it's quiet, and I'm like, is this place running? Because I expect to hear noise. I expect to feel a rhythm. And when I hear that cord, that means people you know, are notifying, they're looking, they think about quality, and that's a great idea.
yeah. All right, so I'm going to ask you another question, different question. I mean, let's move a little bit beyond NUMMI in your career. And I know
Sure.
you had other roles in Toyota, and you went and worked for companies beyond Toyota, like Dana, a huge automotive supplier. You had an important role there. Share with us a couple examples of how you helped advance their lean journey through problem solving.
Yeah, okay. After as you mentioned, after Toyota, I worked for Dana, and it was really a person I had a lot of respect for, and still have a lot of respect for, is Gary Convis. He came and asked me, when did you have some of your best times working at NUMMI? And I said, well, really it was when I was working with suppliers. And he says, well, how'd you like to work with a tier one supplier? And I said, that'd be great. And then I left, and I had a lot of respect, and he needed the help, so I was there. But at Dana, they were using what they called managed by fact method. And we have, there's 6 steps, 8 steps, a lot of different ways to solve a problem, but they were using managed by fact, and they were really relying on the experts to come in and solve problems. And what we wanted to do was to empower the team members. So it was really where the work was happening by the people that were doing the work. And some people didn't think that team members could do that. And so they thought, you know, maybe it's too sophisticated. So then how do we make it simple and keep it easy? So we taught basic skills to problem solving. We utilized the trend charts and all the visuals that were there. They were posted, but nobody was doing anything with that information. So how do we train them? Also create some templates so it was easy for them to do it, and we had a lot of success with that, and all over the world, and not only in the U.S. but South America really took off. Mexico, they did a great job, and where people thought that no, this is too complicated, they loved it, and so had a lot of success and just organizations that. When we got down to the team member level, team leader level, group leader level, it really worked.
Great. So I know you've been asking I'm sure in the course of your work with other organizations too. I know you're in the middle of working with one right now
Mhm.
uh, to help like redesign their production systems and their management systems. What do you think are some critical factors of success in that?
Yeah, I believe that some companies they really want to make changes and they want to make improvements and get on this lean journey. Um, but what I see a lot of times is that they're really focusing on the lean tools, and that's not me. I'm not gonna, I've worked with companies where they said, well, I want to win this award or this prize, and I'm really looking for companies that have a need to make a transformation or a change, and they understand that they have to have the right culture in place, and they need to focus on developing their people. As you mentioned, the company I'm currently working with, they wanted to have a model line, and they struggled the first year to try and do that, and they realized that they really needed develop the frontline leaders in doing that. And so I listened to their story and I was impressed. The first time I went to their plants, they gathered some of their team leaders and group leaders, and I listened to their stories. They they had team leaders that were still working on the line. The ratio is 1 to 50. It was just, but the company realized and understood that, and they were taking steps to fix that.
So, for those that may be listening in our audience here, Sal, who are sort of early in their journey, maybe somewhere around where the company that you just mentioned that you're supporting is, what would be some kind of key things that you'd encourage people to consider when they're just getting started?
Yeah, I think it starts at the top. I think that people need to realize that when you have the vision in place and you have this roadmap that you want to follow, then what's it going to take? So of course there's going to be some the training that's going to happen, developing of people it's going to happen, but you have to have this vision to get there. And some people want to go fast. Some people want to go what I call an inch wide. I always say go an inch wide and a mile deep, and they want to go a mile wide and just do basic training and just like have that check off. And so I really say, really focus on your needs of the company and start there and start small and invest in your people.
Is there an experience that you've had in your long career that you might consider kind of a failure? I'm going to use that word loosely, but just where there's been some struggle.
Yeah,
And what
yeah.
did you learn? What did you learn out of that experience?
Yeah, yeah, good question. I know we've talked about Andon, and I think one of my biggest failures was I was asked to design a new plant, brand new plant, and it was a truck plant, and I was asked to, design the flow, the equipment, hire team members, team leaders, develop the training program, and then one of the important things that we implemented was andon, and if you can imagine, a pitch of work was 50 feet from one fixed position to the next was 50 feet. These are large trucks, and then currently there's a thing that we're calling as 4.0 manufacturing 4.0,
Sure.
which we do a lot of interaction with computers, a computer at each station, and they wanted to put the andon in the computer, and so you have a pitch of 50 feet, and where to place this? Well, they said, let's put it at the beginning, let's put it at the end, and I was able to say, no, we need to put it in the middle, but for me, I wanted to put a cord. I wanted to, and if not a cord, is how do we get the operator not to have to go back to one spot wherever they are in their work cycle, and interrupt that and do that. I've seen lots of innovative ways, remotes, a tray that's nearby, but they didn't want to do that. Everything's in the computer, right? Paperless factory. And then the other thing is they wanted a quiet factory. So they wanted an andon with no noise. And so lots of discussion and lots of examples. And I failed at convincing them to do that.
I guess you could solve that in two ways, right? You could put like smart watches on everybody, so at least the signal's moving with them, and then have those smart watches zap the team leader.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
that's a quiet way to get their attention.
Yeah, but for me, and I've done this before in the past, where sometimes people have to feel how are we going to solve this problem of downtime, excessive downtime, and then I said, well, let's think about coming up with a way that team members don't have to leave their stations, because they're not gonna walk for every time they have a problem, and then the line's gonna stop. And so we come up with a remote cordless andon system. And then the other one was the noise. So let's make a noise that, at NUMMI we had music that would go off. So It's a Small World, we had Star Wars themes. So make it fun for people. And sure enough, as soon as we put those in, our downtime, efficiency, productivity went up. So sometimes you have to learn that way.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was a failure. Like, why couldn't I convince them, give through my experience and examples, and then they learned that.
Okay, so I'm going to transition a little bit more to the problem solving and its relationship to the daily management system, and talk a little bit about problem solving in a little more depth. What do you see, Sal, as the role of leaders to advance their own and others' capabilities in problem solving?
For me, leaders need to have firsthand experience of doing problem solving. And usually what that means is going out, selecting a problem that affects your area, your span of control, and work on it. And that I go back to my time at NUMMI, when we were doing the practical problem solving, the TPP, where it went from the president all the way down the organization. And I was a manager, and I had to present my problem solving A3 to my next level up, and I knew that they had gone through the same process, and and I was able to show them my paper, explain it logically, and solve a problem. And I was able to pass at that point. And then at that time, my responsibility was go down to my assistant managers and my group leaders and do the same thing. So when you get leaders that have those experiences, when I call wisdom, that helps them with being able to share that with others as well.
Can you talk a little bit more about kind of how exactly problem solving connects to the daily management system, and maybe there's an example from your experience on an organization that's really made that connection well and had an effective system?
Yeah, I mean, at NUMMI, we used what we call the GLD boards, and Toyota uses what they call the FMDS boards, which is kind of a combination of that, which is really floor management display system. And it's just paper, it's not electronical. And team leaders, group leaders would fill those out. And from those, we would um, take that information and go out and solve problems. So that information isn't just wallpaper on a board to be talked to, but it's to actually go out and solve problems that are affecting your area. And to me, that's really effective. And this company that I'm currently working in, the first training session we had, we did problem solving, and we were able to go to a board, work as a team, and solve that problem. And they were able to see the trend chart, and over a couple of weeks, they were able to see that problem disappear and go to zero. So that excited everybody, and they're like, "Let's do the next one." They're, let's that motivates people that first it builds confidence, and then it motivates people to do more.
Nice.
In our lean world, Toyota world, we often refer to problem solving as a gap to standard,
hmm
gap to creating a new standard. What are your thoughts about that kind of framework of thinking?
I agree with that statement, but in many cases, people can't see that they have problems,
Mm.
and and the problem is in some cases that they have inventory that hides it, or extra shifts, or resources. So I think the gap to standard or target is you need to have a target, and sometimes that's where it starts. And yeah, and so that's where I'm at, is ensuring that people understand and it's visual, that people can see that gap. And once they see that gap, that they can understand. And too many times I go to boards and it's green all the time. And then that's when we start saying, okay, why is it green? For example, safety metrics. 2 years they haven't had an accident. That's great. So let's change that, and let's look at near misses. Yeah, we don't want near misses, but if we're constantly looking for opportunities to prevent safety issues, and then if you're red, okay, you're red, but that means you're out there trying to figure out how to solve those problems, and you're being proactive on those rather than reactive. So
I've heard of a wise man that once said, "No problem is problem."
exactly, I've heard that many times. Yeah, my Japanese guys would say that all the time, and
Yeah.
they had a word that said, "Yeah, no problem. This is a problem."
So look, I mean, we know that it's not easy to build problem solving capability in individuals, much less in teams, much less in entire departments, organizations. So over the course of your career, Sal, what have you learned? How have you learned to help organizations more effectively in building that most critical capability?
Yeah, I think I said this before, but it really starts at the top. I think once the leader sets the vision and they can identify the gaps, then the real work starts, right? So they could start working on training and developing people, getting the right people in those places to do that. Um, many cases, we disrespect our team member, and by not challenging them, we don't think they have the capabilities. And so I think sometimes our expectations are set low. So I I've heard A3 can be hard. A3 thinking papers, so just they steer away from that. But I believe that people I've seen some amazing A3s by people just, not making them complicated, keeping them simple. And so I think if you develop the skills and you give them the time to solve the problems, I think people will. For me, I believe people are born problem solvers and they want to help, they want to improve. So again, I think it's leadership, empowering people, setting the vision, and empowering people, and showing where the gaps are. And some people don't want to see gaps, right? They're afraid to show their problems. And I think once they can say, yeah, I have a problem, then we can more focus on it.
Great. It's been great discussion, Sal, hearing from you and your experience around, particularly in your roles at NUMMI, coming up through that organization, but also, I mean, some of the great work you've done with other organizations. So let's maybe just we'd like to ask you a couple more questions just to kind of wrap things up. Are there any specific practices, mentors, or experience that you think have been very influential for you on your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate that I learned TPS and very early on in my career. But one thing I learned if I didn't use it, especially like problem solving, if I didn't continue to use it, I would lose it. And so I make it a mission of mine to always have a problem and I work on and then teach others. So I've even done that with my children. So, um, but anyway, I continuously use it. And as far as mentors, I mean, I have many TMC mentors and coaches, and some people that like Ken Fukunaga and Mr. Oba, and Gary Convis has been a great mentor of mine. I've asked him to help me in many cases, and he has, and he's jumped to it. And he taught me that he wasn't the best problem solver, but one of the things that he could do is get the right people together and really work on focusing their efforts on solving problems. So I think that's I've been very fortunate.
Well, I think a great mentor in problem solving like you attracts other mentors and problem solvers. So it's
I have a funny story about Mr. Oba. He sat next to me, and I never really reported directly to him, but I would leave my A3 on my desk, and he would come by and just peek over, look at it, maybe ask me a question. He may put a post-it note or draw something on there. And so, yeah, it was great to just be able to have those people in your life that really made an impact like that.
so maybe just to wrap things up, what's energizing you these days? You say you're continuing to learn. Any challenging work or exciting work you're doing that you want to share?
Yeah, what really excites me nowadays is people are starting to really understand and do more standardized work. And for me, that's a very basic concept, but it's very an important one, right? And even in problem solving, some of the first questions we ask is there standardized work? Are they following standardized work? Can we improve standardized work? And I think what really excites me is that young people whether they're engineers or people that are just coming out of school or people that are working online. And when I'm out there, sometimes I'm the oldest one out there. So I see young people in their 20s and they're excited and of course they want to start using computers and I'm like, we got to do it by hand first and they learn from that and they're open to that. And then so yeah, they could really, whip out a computer and do it, but I think they lose something and they're understanding that. They're like, okay, I get it. I've got to earn the right to do the next step. So it's been great.
Well, that's an excellent way to end this story. Thank you very much, Sal. It's been great having you on and talking to you with us. And Josh, it was great interviewing with you.
Yeah. Thanks, Sal. This is awesome.